A real estate agent sells a house with a dark past only to find out it's cursed. When Daniel Hart, a seasoned real estate agent with an eye for luxury estates, was assigned the Hillcrest Mansion, he felt it was just another big-ticket listing. Perched atop a mist-shrouded hill, the mansion loomed with old-world grandeur and potential profit. Daniel's agency had struggled to sell the property for years, but now the company had slashed the price and wanted it gone fast. His boss handed him the file with a tight-lipped warning. You might not like what you find. Brushing it off, Daniel saw dollar signs. A house that size could land him a hefty commission. So, with his tailored suit and practiced smile, he drove up the winding road to meet the property. The moment he set eyes on the Gothic arches and towering spires, something inside him twisted, but he shook it off. After all, he didn't believe in ghosts, just good sailing. The mansion was a marvel. Ornate stained glass windows, carved oak doors, and ivy trailing down its stone facade. But beneath the beauty lay whispers of misfortune. Daniel skimmed through the documents. 3 families had owned the place in the last 50 years. None had lasted more than a few months. The first vanished after hosting a grand ball. The second left no trace, just a dinner table still set for 6. The third, a reclusive artist, was last seen painting a disturbing mural on the living room ceiling. The locals had long stopped talking about the house, referring to it only as the place that forgets you. Daniel, ever the skeptic, chalked it up to small-town superstition. Still, the silence that clung to the hallways and the cold draft that came with no open windows made his confident demeanor falter. Beauty like this always came with a price. He just didn't know how high. As Daniel began preparing the house for a new listing, he found remnants of the past owners scattered throughout. A child's doll under the stairs, an unfinished oil painting of a screaming face in the study, an old gramophone that played static, but only at midnight. The deeper he dug, the stranger the stories became. He discovered police reports, yellowed newspaper clippings, and one ominous journal entry. The house doesn't want you to leave, the house watches. Each of the previous occupants had simply disappeared. No signs of struggle, no indication of departure. One investigator claimed he found scratch marks inside a mirror. Another refused to ever return to the hill. Daniel tried to ignore it all, telling himself it was urban legend, good marketing even. But every creaking floorboard and shadow at the edge of his vision whispered otherwise. Something had happened to them, and something was still in the house. On his third visit, things began to unravel. The front door, which he'd left ajar, slammed shut behind him. His phone lost signal the moment he crossed the threshold. Light bulbs flickered even though the wiring had been checked. He heard whispers echo through empty hallways, his name spoken low and slow. Once he walked into the kitchen and found muddy footprints leading to the cellar, though the door was bolted shut. Mirrors reflected things that weren't there. A figure standing behind him, just out of frame. One night, after staying late for staging photos, he fell asleep in the lounge chair. When he awoke, he was in a completely different room, one he hadn't seen before. Daniel could no longer explain these events as coincidence. The house wasn't just old and creaky, it was aware, and it was starting to show him what it could really do. The layout of the mansion began to shift in subtle, disorienting ways. At first, it was small, an extra step on the staircase, a window that faced the wrong direction. Then, entire hallways vanished. A bathroom he used in the morning was no longer there by evening. He marked doors with chalk, only to find them wiped clean minutes later. Rooms stretched into impossible proportions, ceilings too tall, corners too sharp. Once, he left the kitchen, walked down the hall, and re-entered the kitchen again, though he had never turned. He tried using his phone's GPS inside, but the dots spun wildly in circles. It became clear that the house was alive, rearranging itself like a puzzle that didn't want to be solved. He no longer felt like a guest in the mansion. He was prey in a living, breathing organism. And every time he blinked, the house moved closer to swallowing him whole. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel pried open a warped panel behind a grand bookcase. A staircase led him down to a hidden chamber. Dust blanketed the air. The room was lined with decaying books, ritualistic symbols carved into stone walls, and shelves of arcane objects, animal skulls, rusted daggers, and jars filled with murky liquid. In the center lay a circle of charred wood with wax figures, seated as if in seance. A large tome sat open on a pedestal, its pages inked in a language Daniel didn't recognize. But one page had been translated in the margins. To enter the house is to enter yourself. What it knows, it shows. What it wants, it takes. He felt a shift in the air, as if the room had exhaled. Suddenly, a door he hadn't noticed creaked open behind him. From the darkness beyond came a low growl, and something began to crawl out. Panicked, Daniel fled the hidden room, but the mansion had already begun to change. Doors he once used now refused to open. Windows showed scenes that didn't match the outside world. Snowstorms, burning forests, an endless hallway of mirrors. He sprinted to the main door and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. The locks turned by themselves, metal groaning like bones shifting. Lights dimmed. The floorboards moaned under unseen footsteps. He tried breaking a window, but it cracked inward, as if something outside was trying to get in. Even the thermostat fluctuated wildly. One room freezing, the next sweltering. The house was alive, and it was toying with him. It didn't want him to leave. It wanted him to stay forever. And Daniel realized the mansion had always been waiting, not for just any occupant, but for him. He wasn't selling the house anymore. He was part of the listing. The mansion began to torment Daniel with precision. He saw visions of his dead sister in the mirrors, heard his father's drunken screams echoing through the vents. Childhood nightmares manifested. A black dog with human eyes, a room full of whispering mannequins. The house didn't guess his fears. It knew them. It fed on them. The more terrified he became, the more powerful it grew. His own memories were used against him. One hallway transformed into the hospital room where his mother died. Another became the church where his fiancée left him at the altar. The symbols in the hidden room weren't just decoration. They were a language of fear, and Daniel understood, finally, why no one ever left. The house didn't kill its victims. It consumed them, bit by bit, until nothing remained but fear and echoes. If he didn't fight back soon, he'd be just another whisper in the wallpaper. Daniel found himself reliving the same day, again and again. He'd wake in the guest room, hear a knock at the door, and find no one there. Walk through the hallway, and the shadows would whisper the same phrase, "You belong to the house." He'd try new routes, new methods of escape, but always end up back in the same room. He tore through the walls, burned sigils, screamed for help, but each action reset the loop. The house wasn't just feeding, it was playing. It had grown fond of him. His watch stopped ticking. Days bled into nights with no clear division. The food in the fridge never rotted. His reflection began to rot instead. At one point, he saw himself from across the hall, grinning, a version of him that had already given up. He realized then he was not the first Daniel, and unless he ended this, he wouldn't be the last. Armed with the knowledge from the forbidden book, Daniel returned to the hidden chamber. The house fought back. Walls bled, chandeliers crashed, and laughter echoed through the stone. But he pressed on, lighting the wax figures, chanting the words written in the margins. A presence emerged from the shadows, a grotesque fusion of all those the house had consumed. It spoke with their voices, pleaded, taunted, threatened. "You are mine, you always were." But Daniel stood firm. He wasn't just facing a ghost. He was facing his fears. He called out their names one by one, and in doing so, weakened the house's grip. The floor cracked, the walls groaned, a storm of wind and memory tore through the mansion. Finally, he struck the pedestal, shattering the tome, and everything went dark. When he awoke, the house was quiet, empty, for sale again. Daniel walked away, scarred but alive. But from a distant window, someone watched. If that story gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more terrifying tales every week. Drop a comment with your favorite moment from the house on the hill and tell us, would you spend a night in that mansion? Until next time, sleep with the lights on.